You're listening to Barely Legal in Web3. I'm your host, Jamelia Greer. On this podcast, we talk about everything at the intersection between legal compliance and Web3 innovation. This podcast is an audio extract from my YouTube channel, where I bring to you in-depth interviews with Web3 entrepreneurs and innovators in Dubai and beyond. If you're a lawyer looking to upskill into Web3, you can check out my website, jameliagreer.com, for courses and our flagship Web3 Bootcamp. The bootcamp is 8 weeks long, and I personally teach you about NFTs, cryptocurrency, DAOs, their associated business models, and legal considerations. In addition to classes, you also get a chance to gain hands-on work experience with one of our partner companies. All of the information contained in this bootcamp is based upon my 15 years legal practice experience in the US, China, and Singapore as an associate in a law firm, in-house counsel, and most importantly, as an entrepreneur myself. So if you want to level up into Web3, check out jameliagreer.com. And now, on to today's discussion. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Barely Legal and Web3. I'm so excited to be kicking off this episode today because between this episode and our last episode that we had recorded, I was able to get a lot of really good feedback from you guys as listeners and really have some interactions and really understand who is listening to this podcast. And it's funny because when you start a podcast, you really have no idea who's going to listen and who wants to listen. And it's a funny experience speaking into what seems like a void. But it was great for me, at least on the end of the person who's creating the podcast, to really get some feedback from listeners and to understand what it is that you all are struggling with, what it is that you'd like to hear more from me about. So I'm very excited to present to you today's episode, which is really the top lessons I've learned in leaving banking and moving into Web3. And I think from a career transition standpoint, it will be very helpful to some of you who are considering leaving your current role and maybe moving into the world of Web3. And when I say the world of Web3, I'm really talking about any kind of legal role in, a company that has an NFT as maybe their main product line, or a crypto platform, or maybe even taking up a role in a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. There are so many different ways, even the metaverse, there are so many different ways in which this could show up in your life. But what I want to do is I want to give you the pure, honest, the bare bones of what I experienced as someone who left the banking industry and moved into Web3. So many of you know from probably one of my earlier episodes that I previously was working, before I started my own company, I was working at Standard Chartered Bank based out of Singapore. I was heading up data privacy and operations there. It was a great role, really gave a lot of opportunity to get into this digital transformation. But for me personally, it was not an environment where I felt as though I could really have an impact and I could really create something. And so that was really sort of the catalyst that got me to thinking about starting my own business, making sure that I was able to use some of the skills that I developed over the years, practicing law, regulatory compliance, working with data, working with technology, and all of that. And Web3 seemed to be the best place that I could use all of those skills and really have an impact. But I didn't really appreciate how different the work environment was working at a place like a bank, even though it was remote. Just the culture, the environment, the types of people that I worked with at that time. I had no idea how different that environment would be from the new types of people that I would work with and the new clients. And I just want to say, before I describe the differences in these environments, that there really is no right or wrong answer. Everyone is going to have their own personal idea of what is best for them. And we are all human. We're all different. What worked for me might not work for you. You may listen to some of this and be like, Jamelia, but what you're describing in the bank sounds great. That's what I'm looking for. Hey, more power to you. Go for it. But for me, these are some of the things these were lessons that I learned during the transition, after the transition, and some things that I would have liked for someone to have explained to me. So here it goes. Here's the first lesson that I learned. The first lesson that I learned is how important work-life balance is. Now, I don't know if this is a combination of me working remotely now, although I worked remotely when I was in Singapore as well due to COVID, or if I tend to think it's more so of the type of company that I work in now and the type of clients that I work with. Having the ability to create your own schedule, which is, I'll say for most of the Web3 small and medium enterprises, is sort of the culture. It is, for me, it's priceless. It's priceless. I can't even describe how much of a difference this has made in my life. You know, what I experienced working in corporate, and not just the bank, but really anywhere in corporate, is this total pull of your calendar. And for those of you who are in-house right now, you know that your calendar really dictates what kind of day you're going to have. You wake up in the morning, you look at that Outlook or whatever it is that you're using, and if you see that most of your day has colored blocks, you know you're not going to get any work done. You know that it's going to be, you may not even get a chance to eat lunch, right? You're going to be in back-to-back calls, back-to-back meetings all day long. And it can really make for just a really tiring, exhausting experience. And so for me, one of the biggest benefits that I've experienced in moving from corporate life or banking or whatever it is that you want to call it, I mean, they are very different, but for purpose of this, I'll just say from the banking industry, because not all industries are as demanding as that one was, is the ability to have more control over balancing when I want to work and when I want to experience my personal life. For example, I need to have my workouts in the morning. It is so important to me to be able to get up in the morning, drop off my kids, and go to the gym. If I don't get that gym workout in the morning, number one, it's probably not going to happen. Number two, if it does happen, it's not going to feel the same way. I'm a very rigid person. It's not going to be the same. It's just not going to be right for me. My whole day is going to be screwed up. So I need to have that time in the morning to take care of personal matters and then also to take care of myself. That has been huge for me. And so having the flexibility to really be able to start around 9:30, but in a way that's less pressed, like less rushed, has been huge for me. And also being able to control a bit more my calendar in terms of when I'm having meetings, being able to feel comfortable saying, I won't be able to take that call. I have a commitment. And it sounds like a small thing, but I know that some of you are listening right now and are saying, wow, I never feel comfortable saying that. I never feel comfortable saying that I have a commitment or I won't be able to take that evening call. And that's huge because that's your life. That is your life. And so if you find yourself in a situation where you really don't feel comfortable pushing back on those boundaries to create that balance that works for you, I'd say this is probably an area that you might want to focus on. So if work-life balance is important to you, and if you're someone that struggles with being able to create healthy boundaries between your work and your personal life, chances are that working in Web3 will be a bit more palatable for you. That might not be for everyone. Some people may say, hey, no, I like it when my days go by really fast. I like having back-to-back meetings. Like I said, more power to you. But for me, I need to have some kind of control over my schedule and my time. And I also need to be able to have time where I can sort of put a pause in work and say, hey, I need to take some time out for myself. So that's one lesson that I think I had no idea it would be such a huge change. It's definitely a plus. Like I said, for me, the work-life balance is extremely important for me. The second piece that I would say is a top lesson that I learned in moving from the banking industry into Web3 is I think I never really appreciated how diverse Web3 clients are. And when I say diverse, I mean in terms of their culture. So the first point we talked about the difference between, the banking industry, you could replace that with aerospace, any kind of a setting, to these maybe more smaller, agile Web3 clients. But within that setting of the smaller, more agile Web3 clients or companies, there's so many different cultures. And I think it's funny because the culture that you see the most, or the culture that is shown the most on social media, you may have glimpses of, is the crypto culture. And in my mind, the crypto culture is, number one, it's much more male dominated at this point in time. That's just kind of how it is. Number two, it is teetering on the edge of, in some cases, struggling with being ethical and compliant, in some cases, I will say. And then in other cases, it really wants to be very cool. So in my mind, the crypto culture is too close to banking for me, meaning that it doesn't really get to the heart of some of the social values that I've seen in other areas of Web3. Transparency and diversity and inclusion and leveling the playing field, using the decentralized technology to make things more accessible to people from all walks. And I'm not saying that for all crypto companies, but I'm saying for the most part, because crypto has been so male dominated, you probably will see a lot of the same players from the banking and the finance industry moving over to the crypto industry, and therefore some of the same qualities of those industries are also moving over to crypto. So that's your first kind of persona within Web3. Another persona that I didn't know existed was and this is one that I like the most, is the NFT space. Now, it probably is the one that I like the most because of my current role working for World of Women and this NFT space, which has a very clear purpose in supporting women artists, which for me, I'm all about supporting women. So to be able to find a culture that supports women, it has the technology component to it, the NFT piece to it as well, and the culture piece, that's huge for me. So that's something that I didn't really appreciate before that existed. So if work-life balance is important to you, and if you're someone that struggles with being able to create healthy boundaries between your work and your personal life, chances are that finding, and of course, those companies that are in the crypto space and the NFT space are very different than organizations that they would call themselves DAOs or decentralized autonomous organizations. They work in a very decentralized manner. Much of the work is remote, if not all of those jobs are remote. So there really is a wide variety of different cultures and experiences that you could have in working in Web3. So I would say that to say that even though in this podcast we talk about, what it's like to be a lawyer in the Web3 space, you also need to recognize that in and of itself could lead to very different experiences for different people working in different parts of Web3. And we haven't even talked about, metaverse and what's going on there. And I imagine that those people who are lawyers in that space also have very different experiences. So keep that in mind and maybe do some research about which one is more suitable to you. When I first started out in this journey, I thought, oh yeah, it's all Web3. You could advise a bit on crypto, you could advise a bit on NFTs. No, now the industry is so developed. Okay, it's a bit more developed. It's a bit more developed than it was before. And I really think that lawyers need to niche down. I think that if you're going to work in NFTs, then you should work in NFTs. And gain some experience in that area. And some of that knowledge may bleed over into, a metaverse industry or maybe a crypto industry. But for the most part, there's so much to learn in each individual technology that really you could build an entire career based mainly in metaverse and virtual reality without really needing to do much in crypto. So it really is something to think about, something that I didn't appreciate when I first started. So think about it as you go in. I think another lesson or something that I didn't appreciate when I first started my journey moving from banking into Web3 is really how much value I could add. And I saved this lesson for last because I really think it is the strongest lesson. Many times when you're working in a large corporation as a lawyer, maybe on a team with 10 other lawyers or 20 other lawyers, and gosh, when I was working at United Technologies, which is now Raytheon Technologies, we easily had like maybe 200 lawyers worldwide. So it's hard to really quantify and qualify how much value you add. It's hard to see it in the bigger picture because those organizations are so large. And not only are they so large, is that many of them are so old that it's difficult to create change. And at times, lawyers may feel as though their work is either not appreciated or it's not really contributing to the bottom line, as they say, or it's just not as valuable as work that would come from sales or from business development, closing deals. In Web3, I'd have to say that because so many of the companies are so new and the personas of the founders are people who are coming from places where they haven't had much corporate experience or they haven't had much experience running a business. As a business lawyer, you're able to add so much value. And it's great. You're able to add value in terms of strategy, which is planning, assuming that you've worked with legal entity structuring or you've worked in corporate transactions. You're able to take all of that experience and bring it to the table to a setting where people really might need that kind of help in a very urgent way. And so being able to add value in this kind of way and draw upon experiences from other industries or experiences from your past work is huge. And back to that whole, one of those soft benefits, the first soft benefit was work-life balance. I think this last benefit about feeling valued is huge because so many people that I speak with, I keep in touch with people from places where I've worked, and one of the most consistent things that I hear is that they don't feel like they're valued. They don't feel as though their contributions matter. And that is probably the main reason why people leave their job, is because they feel like, I'm just here, pushing paper along, helping people check boxes. My work is not seen. I'm not appreciated. I'm not valued, or my work is not valued. If you're able to transition into an industry where there's such a huge need for people with skill sets like yours, that is a plus. And if you're able to end the day saying like, wow, I really saved their ass today. I really did a lot. That's huge. And, for me, that's been a big plus, especially when, I feel as though, on a personal note, I feel as though I have a lot of skills that they don't really fit into the lawyer box, but they do add value, if that makes sense. Of course, it makes sense. Not just lawyers add value, but the point is that there's a way to add as a lawyer in a Web3 startup or a small company that you might not be able to do in a traditional banking job or manufacturing or even just larger corporations, even those that are still in technology. So that's something to think about. So here's a bonus lesson that I just thought of as I'm recording this. Usually I make notes beforehand, but this is something that is not a note that just kind of popped into my head. One thing that I didn't appreciate or didn't really understand when I first came into Web3 is how integratable this technology is with other industries. So I've worked in aerospace and manufacturing. I've worked in hospitality. I've worked in banking. And for those of you that are listening, you probably know that's quite rare. Most lawyers stick with one industry and, that kind of is your career and you kind of get to know that industry in and out, at least when you're in-house. So that's been a privilege for me. But now that I'm in Web3, I'm able to work in and to work across areas that had absolutely nothing to do with what I've done previously, like the entertainment industry and the fashion industry. And for me, that's exciting. That's exciting. I mean, if I can work with a brand that I know and like and, have purchased their products, and it's kind of like fangirling in a way, but I didn't really appreciate how easy it would be to kind of get those touch points in other industries by working in Web3. So even more so than so if you were an in-house counsel at Google or Facebook, you might not, maybe you might be on the periphery of some deals that touch upon brands or other industries, but you probably are just going to stay in the technology communication space. You're probably not really going to have, unless you're in the partnerships department, you're not really going to have so much access to other industries like with Web3. But I see it so much, whether in crypto or in the NFT space. You might be in-house counsel working at a crypto startup or a crypto company, and they're doing a partnership with travel, or they're doing a partnership with makeup, or they're collaborating with an influencer. And I just think that's so cool because normally as attorneys, you guys know, it can be very boring. You'll be sitting behind the desk all day, just type. But to be able to have access to that, to get a glimpse into other industries, maybe to meet people who are in those spaces that you admire or that you're otherwise interested in, I think that's pretty cool. So that's a benefit. That's a lesson and that's a benefit. And, like I said at the beginning of this, these are my experiences. These are the bits of information I would give to you as lessons and things I've learned along the way. Some of it may be good, some of it may be bad. Like I said, for me, these are things that I didn't really appreciate as much before I made the transition. And of course, there's some downsides. We'll save it for another episode. I'll give you guys the good stuff first. But, you really do have to assess, firstly, where you are right now and whether or not you want to move out of that space, whether or not it's the right time in your life to move out of that space. And it's not easy. People have commitments. You may have personal reasons why you need to stay. You may have financial reasons why you need to stay. Everyone's situation is different, but you do need to kind of assess it. When I started my venture into Web3, I had no idea that I would be doing a podcast about and talking to entrepreneurs in Dubai or, previous clients and people who I've worked with. It has been an amazing journey. And like I said, there are benefits because if you're very entrepreneurial, if you're the person who likes change and likes to explore different things, then that's great. But if you're someone who likes security, if you like the security of knowing, what every day is going to be like, what exactly is expected of you. Hey, I know a lot of people who are in industries and have worked in-house for maybe 20 plus years, and they're safe. Sure, they're not working on the sexiest things, but their job is safe. They will never get fired, okay? And if they get laid off, they're making bank. So there's pros and cons, and everyone's situation is different. I wouldn't want anyone to listen to this podcast and not really assess their own situation and then go ahead and jump into Web3 and say, hey, I hated it. Thanks, Jim. You get to make the decision yourself, but this is here to give you a little insight on how it is. And of course, if you're ever interested in learning a bit more about the skills, the technology, some of the legal issues, you can check out the Web3 Bootcamp. The next cohort that we're having is in January, so make sure you stay tuned and check out the website for that. But other than that's my bit of advice for you guys for this podcast episode. Really think about it. Really think about yourself, what are your characteristics, and what you're looking for in your life. because that will ultimately help guide you and steer you towards whether or not it's time to make the change. So with that, I will leave you. Have a great day, and I look forward to talking to you on the next episode. Take care, guys. Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to today's episode. I appreciate when you guys tune in and the time that you take to listen to the show and support us. And I have one thing that I'd love for you to do that would really help us out, which is rate the show. If you've enjoyed it, make sure you rate it. You can do it on whatever platform you're listening on. That would do wonders for us. And if you really want to be a super fan and really support the show, there's a link below that you can support us and donate a small monthly contribution, which allows us to continue to create great content for you. Thanks so much again. Appreciate you, and see you next time.